Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest poorly explained plans for exams in England this year, along with the dereliction of responsibility which has effectively put students who had to be sitting exams this week and next week in a very difficult situation where they had to choose which method of assessment would be best for them. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. I know I didn't see this one coming either. Basically, it's the first week of Brexit and I do a load of Brexit videos, and here we've got a day when there's no Brexit videos. They're queuing up as well, but this morning's video obviously was quite momentous. This one's really important as well, with me being a teacher. So I'm going to focus on three main parts here. First of all, how Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, has abandoned students sitting exams this week and next. Two, how he is still failing to provide teachers with the information that we really need to plan. And three, how Gavin Williamson actually has a 100% failure record. And even Boris Johnson seems to be saying things are not going to get any better while he's in charge. So why is he in charge? But first of all, so after being told by the experts to keep schools closed until they can be made safe, they're not safe right now, Prime Minister, do you understand this? Until they're safe, keep them closed. The government allowed kids to come back from their Christmas breaks. Their Christmas breaks where many of them will have become infected. Not a large proportion perhaps, but a lot of them as a number would have become infected because of the mixing of households that was permitted on one day and would have happened on other days anyway. So that they could then pass on that infection to their classmates who had gotten away with it, maybe because their households were a bit more sensible that Christmas, and now they're going to be carrying that infection home, potentially to shielding relatives. And then a day later, the government then shut them. It's like, what gain do they think they made by having that one day? None at all. This was no plan. The government talked about plans, and also the government had access to no special information on the day they made that announcement. All the information they made that announcement on was known beforehand. But there are exams going on this week and next week. There was some yesterday, for example, for vocational courses, including the new tech levels. So would the government cancel these? They announced that they were largely cancelling summer exams. Then there was some plan for maybe not cancelling all exams. It was all a bit up in the air. But would they cancel these ones? After some dithering, they decided to leave it up to individual schools and colleges to decide. Some will have decided to cancel them. I don't know the relative proportion. Some will have gone ahead. I know the college I do work for went ahead with them on the basis that a lot of students have said they wanted to go ahead with them. And you can, on site, if no other students are in, you can accommodate exams for the relatively small number of students that are sitting them on any one day in a COVID secure way. Now, normally what happens, of course, if an exam goes ahead and you don't turn up to the exam, you would fail. Now, any student who didn't turn up to this exam would not be failing as such, like our college made it clear. You know, we understand that we can arrange the exam in a COVID secure way here, but you may not be able to get here in a COVID secure way. You may have to use public transport or something like that. The normal buses would not be running. We might be able to arrange for transport, but again, you may not consider all that safe either. So some students would have had a decision to make. Now, I'm going to be honest, if I were in this situation, if I were a student in this situation, I wouldn't be thinking to myself, is it safe for me to go and do my exam or not? Not from a COVID point of view. I would be thinking, what's going to get me the best grade? It's as simple as that. You know, if I would absolutely game the system. If I was super pumped about the exam, oh yeah, I'm going to get the best grade. I'm nailed on and I like doing exams. I want to go do the exam. That's what I would do. Under any other circumstance, if I had any doubts whatsoever, and bear in mind, if I were the sort of student that was, you know, felt I was really ready for an exam, it's very likely my teachers, you know, would have been of the same view and their assessments would be really good as well. And I don't think I'd be gaining by turning up to the exam, put it that way. You know, I'd only be gaining by turning up to the exam if I felt that I hadn't been firing on all cylinders throughout the course and I was suddenly making good. I'd done lots of work over Christmas and I thought that I would do better than a considered assessment based on homeworks and stuff like that. So for a lot of students, they'll think to themselves, well, actually, I'd rather my teacher did, because I do better in class than I do in an exam. So difficult decision for some of them. Some of them may do the exam, get a poor grade and think, I'd have been better off with the teacher assessed grade here. You know, the education secretary should have made the decision to cancel them. You know, he was basically cancelling everything else. Why wouldn't he have cancelled that? No backbone. That's all he had to do. Instead of just going, oh, well, we'll leave it up to centres. No, make a decision. Then comes the decision on exams later in the year. This is going to affect far more people. And I was saying that they can't possibly do what they did last year, because they initially said, well, we're going to use this algorithm. Dominic Cummings has got this great idea. We're going to use an algorithm. And it went as well as all of Dominic Cummings' ideas. It was designed by a chimp. Utterly useless. So that ended up being a disaster, which they should have acted on sooner, given that exactly the same disaster was initiated by the Scottish government. The UK government for England and Wales had longer to work all this out, and they didn't. They watched Scotland make a mess of it. They watched Scotland, you know, the Scottish government get the public backlash, and they still thought it'd be a great idea for them to do it. Bloody idiots. Anyway, one of the problems with the algorithm is it actually disadvantaged kids from poorer backgrounds, as in the nature of the algorithm was always going to do that. So that was abandoned in favour of centre assessed grades. It turns out maybe teachers can predict these grades more accurately than this algorithm that actively says, are you a poor kid? Yeah, well, we're knocking 2 grades off your predicted result then. Now, they got away with that last year because the grades were expected to be moderated by an algorithm to fit past performance. This year, it's a whole different kettle of fish. Williamson has gone straight for this option. He says, well, we're using teacher grades. Now, it's not actually quite true, by the way. I don't actually know fully how that's going to work, because centres will now work out their grades knowing that they are essentially going to be used, subject to external moderation, because that's the thing, there's still going to be some external moderation. Oh, that means an algorithm is going to be used. Yeah, but they won't call it that. And I don't know what form that external moderation is going to take. You know, it might be that the teacher grades will be, actually I say teacher grades, it's not actually teacher grades used, I'll come to that in a minute. It might be that the centre assessed grades will be used as long as they fit within some sort of tolerance based on historical data from that centre. Now, you could sort of get away with that last year. This year, the problem is that it's now the second year running where they've done this. So historical accurate data, as in from exams, hasn't been done for a couple of years. So it's not an easy thing to moderate. And, you know, what about centres that are maybe new centres or teaching a new course and they don't have any historical data? You know, so it can't base it on the individual centre, which means it's going to work very much like the old algorithm that got them into such trouble if they're not very careful. I don't know what the other solution is. You know, will it be the case, for example, that from a centre's point of view, do they inflate their grades a little bit to try and game it a bit and get away with it? Some did last year. Or not the majority. Or will they be punished for trying to inflate it a bit? You know, where do they fit in that? We don't know. Also, like I said, so I'll come to the teacher grade thing. So Williamson talks about teacher grades. That's not what he means, dozy beggar. The grades awarded last year weren't teacher grades. They were not the grades that the teacher said, I predict that my student's going to get this grade. What happened was the teachers did predict those grades. Then they went to their own senior management team who applied their own system to moderate them. Some of them were changed. So what we're really talking about is centre assessed grades. The teacher grades go to the senior leaders. They apply their own system to moderate them. Then they went off. Now, here's the thing. So I have a physics background. I have a strong mathematical background. I'd be comfortable with coming up with a mathematical model that would turn teacher predictions for an individual centre. I'm not talking about nationally. You need far more qualified people than me. But for an individual centre, I could absolutely develop a mathematical model that would turn teacher predictions into centre assessed grades that would not look out of place if you mapped it onto past performance. It would not look like it was completely out of kilter, you know, which, by the way, as I said, will be 2 years old, because we didn't get any proper data last year and we're not getting any this year. But I'd back myself to do that, Now, I don't think even all science teachers would be as confident, and I'd be quite sure that the vast majority of humanities teachers would not. Now, some of them will naturally have an interest in maths and will have developed some perfectly serviceable skills, even impressive skills, but the majority will not. In fact, I've known many humanities teachers struggle to work out percentages. Now, here's my concern. By far and away, most senior teaching leaders, in the UK at least, are not from a science background. It's really stark. Very, very few senior leaders from a science background. That means, by definition, the vast majority of senior teaching leaders do not have strong mathematical skills, no matter how pretty they think their pie charts are. This means there will be huge variance in how well an individual centre decides its grades compared to others. Normally they don't have to really do this. They're supposed to do some data analysis, but that's down to them. They don't actually have to decide grades as such. Now, I for one want to know exactly how the grades are to be externally moderated, and I want to know that as soon as possible. I'm preparing students right now for an assessment. And when you're preparing people for assessment, you don't just teach the subject knowledge, you teach them how to do well in that particular form of assessment. I do not know the rules of the game right now. And this isn't something that's just come up. This is what annoys me. You might imagine, well, they've only just made the decision to close, Phil, give them time. No, absolute nonsense. The government said back in September that there was a risk that exams might not go ahead. So why weren't they planning? Do you know what they had the nerve to do? They said, we really want exams to go ahead, but there is a possibility that they might not. You need to prepare for that. That's what they said to teachers. You need to prepare for that. Well, why wasn't Gavin Williamson preparing for that? Why wasn't he getting his officials to work on a contingency plan in case they had to cancel exams? Because it's quite clear from what he's been saying in his statement to Parliament yesterday that there was no planning at all for that. None at all. Yes, I'm not pleased. And no, it's not just because I predicted that exams would go ahead and he's knackering my 2000. In fact, do you know what? It's the first week of 2021 and already my bingo card's knackered. But finally, I also just want people to consider something here regarding Gavin Williamson, Education Secretary, who had an important job at this time of national emergency, but not one where solutions were not available. In fact, I would say, although his job was really important, it wasn't even the most difficult position in government, by far not the most difficult. But he's gotten everything wrong. Every time he's said he wants to do something or he wanted to do something, he's failed. I mean, every time. Everything he said he wanted to do has failed spectacularly. Yesterday, he said he wanted to have kept schools open. So what you're really saying is that you failed to keep schools open. Now, sure, that failure is also partly down to Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, for making such an arse of, for example, test and trace. Rishi Sunak for not providing the funds to allow most workers to be able to afford to be tested and isolate. There's a lot of people who should be tested and not doing because they cannot afford to be told they've got to isolate and manage on our pittance of a statutory sick pay. And of course, Boris Johnson for absolutely failing to lead the nation as a result of his, amongst other things, letting those close to him break the rules and get away with it, which of course loses public trust. But Gavin Williamson had an influence too. He could have made schools safer. Let's look at what he's actually done to try and make schools safe. He said, you should maybe keep students far apart. So, we have them spaced out as far as we can. Now, I'm in a college, it's relatively straightforward to do that. In a school where they're absolutely jammed in, no, you can't do that. They've only got so many rooms, and it's very, very difficult to space kids out if you've got a lot of kids and a small number of classrooms or just a small number of teachers, because the schools don't have enough to pay for more teachers. So not actually possible, Gavin, to space them out as much as would be preferable. And then he said, you should wear face masks. This is later on. You should wear face masks when you're walking down corridors. Or what about in the classrooms where they spend most of their time? Oh, no. There's no need for that. Unless you want to, and some wanted to, but they don't have to. Oh, and what about primary schools? Oh, no, they don't need to wear face masks anyway. They're too young, you see. They can't transmit the virus. All right, nice one. Now, just look at what he said he wanted to do during the pandemic. These are his main policy aims. His first policy aim, going back to last year, he wanted schools, once they'd closed, and they closed fairly quickly, he wanted them to be able to open for summer. He failed to do that. He wanted to use an algorithm to decide student grades. He failed to do that. He wanted to keep schools open in 2021, failed to do that. He wanted exams to go ahead this year, failed to do that. Now, we also need to point out that various senior members of the government, including Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock, were saying that teachers were not placed in any danger. They weren't exposed to any greater risk from COVID than the general population. Then we see that the actual fact of the matter is that teachers were exposed to a level of 333% greater risk than the average member of the public. So Gavin Williamson has also failed in his duty to teachers' safety. Boris Johnson said that Gavin Williamson is doing his job to his utmost ability. Now here's the thing. If 100% failure rate, literally failing on 100% of his intended policies, is his best, and I'm not going to argue with that, by the way, if that is his best, then he has no place in frontline politics, let alone monkeying about with the future prospects of our younger generation. But of course he won't be sacked because he's untouchable. Anyone who backs Johnson during any of his shows of incompetence gets backed themselves. That's how it works. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.